So, greetings, friends. I'll just give just a moment or two before I give today's talk to let anybody who's joining just now to join. So today's talk follows last week's talk on developing meditation and practicing meditation within the broader framework of the Eightfold Path. This is the way the Buddha taught meditation, not as a standalone or even a singular practice. The Buddha taught meditation, specifically shamatha vipassana meditation, to deepen concentration so that the refined mindfulness of the entire Eightfold Path could be developed. So today's talk is on fear arising in meditation and also off our cushions. And let me just define how I'm addressing fear. I'm not talking about the type of fear that is necessary to protect human life. Whenever I think about this subject, my mind goes back to a question that was brought up. Well, I think it was one of our first retreats 4 or 5 years ago. I was talking about the not self characteristic and talking about the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, and a question arose from someone in a somewhat challenging way, but I just mean that to characterize how the question was phrased. It was itself rooted in ignorance, but the question was this: that if you're standing on a train tracks and a train is coming at you, what do you do? And the implication was, do you, because of a misunderstanding of not self, of anatta, the implication was, do you simply just stand there and get killed, get annihilated? And of course, the answer is, the sensible, reasonable, and well-concentrated answer is, you take 2 steps to the left. You get out of the direction of the train. You take yourself out of harm's way. And that applies to anything. The Buddha's Dhamma does not teach annihilation or even diminishing of the importance of maintaining a physical body, ultimately for the sole purpose of awakening in this lifetime. So the fear that I'm talking about is an underlying fear of the self-referential ego self, of losing control. And initially, it's really losing importance in the ongoing train of consciousness that we're originally stuck in. So in that sense, fear is simply an aspect of dukkha, an aspect of stress, and it causes ongoing stress. I just want to adjust the camera a little bit. It is one of the major causes of ongoing stress in our lives, whether we realize it or not. So different definitions of fear might be worry or anxiety. It is a distraction, even if it's an unnoticed or underlying distraction to most of our lives. It's a distraction that is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, meaning that once a profound understanding of the First Noble Truth is developed through the Eightfold Path, the Fourth Noble Truth, there is no longer any stress arising, including the stress of fear or anxiety or worry. So on our cushion, and this is a very common occurrence. I'm just trying to think, just put a percentage on how many of the percentage of students that have brought this up, whether in class or directly to me, and I would bet it's 85 or 90% that have mentioned the difficulty of fear arising in meditation. So that fear is an aspect of dukkha. The Buddha describes dukkha, or stress, or disappointing or unsatisfactory or distracting experiences arising from craving. It originates in craving, and it is continued by clinging. And both of those components contribute to the quality of mind of fear. Initially, craving for self-referential existence, for the establishment of a self-referential ego personality, is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, meaning it does not understand the process of of ongoing becoming from an awakened, fully mature point of view. Rather, it's a fabricated view of self that is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Again, this is what the Buddha awakened to, and it's described in Dependent Origination in the Paticca Sutta. The Buddha awakened to the profound understanding that it is ignorance of Four Noble Truths, that through 12 observable causative links all manner of suffering arises. And then he taught the Four Noble Truths, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, in his very first sutta, to explain that process. And then everything he taught for the rest of his 45-year teaching career was taught in that context, the context of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths. And those of you that listen to my talks hear me say that over and over and over again, because it's important to remember the context of the Buddhist teaching in order to understand how to apply any specific teaching, including even the teaching on developing the Eightfold Path, including understanding how fear arises. So fear, anytime fear is experienced outside of a reasonable or useful application of fear, such as finding yourself stuck on a train tracks when a train is coming at you, or noticing a car coming at you, or any type of real threat towards physical harm, that's a reasonable fear, and reasonable steps should be taken in that moment to protect the body and protect the opportunity to awaken in this lifetime. So that's a separate type of fear. The fear that arises during meditation is a fear of annihilation. It's a fear of the diminishing in importance of maintaining a self-referential views. So in meditation, as one begins a meditation practice, the distraction and the difficulty of meditation is simply to remain mindful of the sensation of breathing. And the reason that is that a self-referential ego self, that which the Buddha describes as anatta, insists on establishing itself in every thought, word, and idea that occurs to this mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. In other words, every thought is a thought that is seeking to establish a self within that thought. Every thought is a self-referential thought until something is developed to interrupt that thinking and turn the mind towards wisdom where there was once ignorance. That's the purpose of the Eightfold Path. So in meditation, as we start quieting our minds, a self-referential ego self often experiences that loss of control as fear because it feels like it is being annihilated. And that really is true. Of course, we have to remember that there's nothing of any substance that is being annihilated. It's simply a fabricated view of self rooted in ignorance of the way things truly are, meaning we gain that understanding through gaining insight through the three marks of existence, the impermanence of all phenomena, including the phenomena of thoughts arising within anatta, a misunderstanding of self. The Buddha used the term anatta to simply describe that views supporting a self that are rooted in ignorance do not accurately describe a self. Let go of the views. It's the views that cause that third mark of existence of ongoing dukkha. So in meditation, as we begin to interrupt that process, let me backtrack just a little bit. Every time we find that we're caught up in our thoughts and come back to the sensation of breathing, we're interrupting the process of conditioned thinking, meaning thinking that is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths and thinking that is solely being utilized to continue a self-referential ego self. In this sense, I'm not saying that the results of our thoughts aren't often simply useful for living in the world. They are. But in relation to the Dhamma, in relation to conditioned thinking, thoughts are used to continue to maintain anatta, that which is rooted in wrong views of self. So in meditation, as we come back to the sensation of breathing, fear often arises, and it's that fear of annihilation, of losing control, of losing even the ability to maintain anatta within our own thinking. And of course, that is where the problem lies. It's within our thinking, and thinking rooted in conditioned thinking, meaning thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So as we start developing a quiet mind, start to interrupt that process of following one self-referential thought with the next, fear often arises. And this is where the importance of the entire Eightfold Path is important. As I talked about last week, when fear arises in meditation and seems to want to distract us even off of our cushion to cease meditation, either in that session or maybe even entirely due to that fear, to remember that right view points us to the understanding that it is wrong views or conditioned views rooted in ignorance that are the problem. And following that right intention then is the intention to recognize craving and clinging. And as fear arises in meditation, it's due to the self-referential ego personality, due to its continued craving for maintaining itself and clinging to those views rooted in ignorance. That's the essence of fear. And so every time we come back to the sensation of breathing, we are directly addressing that fear. And coming back to the sensation of breathing is diminishing the effects of that fear from conditioned thinking. In other words, we're deconditioning that response that leads to fear in meditation. So every time we do that, no matter what is occurring, and so the fear could be just a general feeling of anxiety, or it could be attaching itself to a specific fear of something that may be occurring in the very near future or any time in the future. It could be in the next moment during meditation. It could be, in the next day, the next week, the next year, the next lifetime. It doesn't matter. It's the same irrational, distractive fear that's rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So every time we come back to the sensation of breathing, we're increasing our concentration and we're deconditioning our minds towards reacting with fear. Now, off our cushion, the same is true when an irrational fear, meaning not something that is necessary for survival, arises, such as anxiety or worry about a situation that we are finding ourselves in currently or is upcoming. The same applies when we come back to what's occurring in this moment. And the breath in the body is so helpful in this manner. When we find ourselves off our cushion, but becoming consumed with anxiety and fear, to take a moment to simply be mindful of the breath in the body. And that will often begin the process of calming the mental fabrication that is leading to further anxiety and leading to a sense of mindlessness, meaning we've lost our minds now and are so consumed by the anxiety and worry that we can no longer function mindfully in this present moment. And so that type of fear, and I would say even on our cushion, but that type of fear can lead to pathological anxiety where other interventions might be necessary, meaning therapy, excuse me, therapy, or even in some extreme cases, medication to at least bring the mind back to even a chemically induced state of calm, so that a non-chemically induced state through meditation within the framework of the Eightfold Path can now begin to establish a sense of mindfulness even during that fear. So to finish this talk, fear should be looked at as the basic problem, and it arises from wrong views of self. So anytime that we're stuck in fear, and I'm just to reemphasize, I'm talking about an irrational fear of anxiety or worry. Anytime that is a present quality of mind, we know that we are stuck in and engaged in continual I-making, and we know that I-making is an aspect of wrong views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So in that moment, the solution, the antidote to fear in the moment, and then ultimately to all fear, to developing a mind of lasting peace and equanimity, is to practice restraint in that moment and come back to what is actually occurring in this moment. And then on our cushions, we are the usefulness of practicing shamatha vipassana meditation to deepen concentration is clearly seen then, because a well-concentrated mind is a mind that is free of fear. And so now to bring it back to meditation, when fear arises in meditation, dispassionately come back to the sensation of breathing. And even if that mindfulness of the breath only lasts for a moment or two, and fear arises, whether it's just an emotion or a feeling of fear, or an actual idea of fear, a scenario of fear, again, come back to the sensation of breathing. And in that way, we are using meditation in its proper context to diminish all conditioned thinking. And as we deepen that concentration, we can then continue to integrate the broader framework of the Eightfold Path to develop even a more profound understanding of the underlying pervasiveness of fear and how fear arises from wrong views of self. So that concludes today's talk. I hope you found some benefit from this talk. And if you did, please consider a donation at becoming-buddha.com. And I hope to see you next Wednesday. Peace.